Hey there, hello there. It's me, Jeff Diamond, and today, on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2016, I will pay homage to a lot of people who have died in the previous year of 2016. It was known as one of the worst years in recorded history, you know, with the Fort McMurray wildfire, a lot of tornadoes, a lot of Syrian refugees coming over, Brexit, and of course Trump. You knew something was absolutely typically wrong. And that's what I'm here for. Anyway, there were a lot of deaths in the world. There were two sets of deaths that I figured. Sports deaths and celebrity deaths. Now, when I did the list and looked at who died and all that, it was hard to decide. I'd like to thank sportsencyclopedia.com. That's sports and then with the dash, cyclopedia.com, for the memoriam of all the sports stars who had died. I had to put one on the list that they forgot about. Well, I looked at them and said, well, who were the most influential to die? And I ranked them in the top 20. So basically, this first video is about the 20 biggest sports deaths in history. Now, this one, unlike the other one that I will post tonight, is ranked. The other one will be just chronological because I can't make assumptions. Okay, so here we go. First off, at number 20, I put Bud Collins. Bud Collins was a big voice for NBC from Wimbledon. When NBC got the rights to host Breakfast at Wimbledon, like to show the finals of the 1980, I think 1980 was the first time they've shown it. It is entirely the men's and the women's Wimbledon finals. It was huge. Bud Collins was there doing commentary and all that. He popularized the bow ties and all that. And Bud Collins, of course, is the voice behind the Borg-McEnroe match of 1980. The final of 1980, which was a huge classic. Number 19, Rick McLeish. I know that as a anti-Flyer fan, well, I'm a Leaf and a Ranger fan, Rick McLeish was not worth noting. But the fact of the matter is Rick McLeish was a strong, powerful winger for the Philadelphia Flyers, and he was part of why the Flyers won the Stanley Cup in 74 and 75. Number 18 was Joe Garagiola. I remember I had his autobiography at my farm home for many years, but then I didn't take it with me when I moved to Kitchener. But anyway, Garagiola was a good play-by-play / color commentator for NBC. He was a color commentator for NBC, but he did play-by-play with the best of them. He's kind of like the Buck Martinez of the 70s and 80s. He did a lot of stuff for NBC in the 70s and 80s, and pretty much took over the play-by-play voice of NBC's World Series and baseball coverage from Curt Gowdy after NBC decided to axe Curt Gowdy. Rumors were still rampant on how Curt Gowdy ended up being fired. Some say Major League Baseball was mad about a comment Gowdy made on a news report during the World Series, and NBC said they were going to get rid of Curt Gowdy anyway. They just wanted to put Garagiola up and running. So anyway, he was a big baseball player. Number 17, Andy Bathgate. I know my brethren at Blue Shirt Underground Radio will like this, but Andy Bathgate, of course, was a superstar for the New York Rangers way before he played for the Leafs. Andy Bathgate was traded from the Rangers to Leafs in that 1964 trade alongside Don McKinney, which kind of helped out the Leafs. The funny thing is that trade actually was a few days after the Leafs were embarrassed on home ice 11-0 by Boston, which was one of the worst teams in the NHL at that time. Andy Bathgate helped the Leafs win a few Stanley Cups afterwards, and he even played for Pittsburgh in the expansion, in the main expansion, the Super Six, as I called them. Expansion, yeah, he was a Winnipeg man through and through. Number 16, John Brophy. The Leaf fan in me knew this would be there, but John Brophy, of course, the head coach of the Leafs, he was a massively popular coach in the minor pros, like the Long Island Ducks and all that. He was actually partially responsible for the character Rich Dunlop in Slapshot, which I have on DVD, which I should be watching soon, which I want to. But anyway, John Brophy was huge. He spent a few years in the Leafs and famously got them to a last day win over the Detroit Red Wings in the 87-88 season to make the Leafs make the playoffs ahead of the Minnesota North Stars. But what would have been funny is that if the Leafs had lost, they probably would have had the number 1 pick. It might have picked Mike Modano. But the North Stars picked Modano, and the rest is freaking history. Number 15, Carlos Alberto. Now this one was the one I said I had to add because they didn't recognize Carlos Alberto's death. I do that. Carlos Alberto, of course, one of the best Brazilian captains in soccer history. Of course, the main captain in the 1970 World Cup side that had like Pele, Jairzinho, that guy, Jairzinho? That's the guy who scored in every game, right? I can't remember the other guys. Tostado, Revellino, Milton. But anyway, Carlos Alberto is known for scoring that famous team goal in 1970, the best team goal I've ever seen. Brazil against Italy in the finals, 3-1. A lot of sharp passing. Carlos Alberto scored. Now, if you watch Phoenix from the Flames on YouTube, it's a series that Frank Skinner and David Baddiel did for BBC back in the mid-90s. Or was it ITV? I can't remember. He was shown recreating his famous team goal. Even had Jeff Astle, the real Jeff Astle, help him. Anyway, number 14, Ed Snyder. Not related to me because even though my mom's last maiden name is Snyder, but it's spelled differently. This Snyder from Philadelphia, Snider, was the shining force for why the NHL actually expanded from 6 to 12 teams. I know Ed Snyder was kind of a whiny bitch mostly. In 1999, when the Flyers got eliminated by the Leafs, he blamed the refs and all that, saying that it was a disgrace and all that. But anyway, Ed Snyder was a pivotal part for why Philadelphia got a franchise instead of Vancouver back in the main expansion, the Great Expansion of 1967. But anyway, he helped Philadelphia do well, getting a couple Stanley Cups, get some good playoff runs, and despite me having to hate him because, as a Leaf and Ranger fan, he helped the Flyers out, and he helped hockey in general. Number 13, Ralph Branca. I did not notice the irony when I made him number 13, because I know Ralph Branca was wearing number 13, and he was actually in, not a Sports Illustrated cover, because Sports Illustrated was created in 1954. But anyway, back in the day, he posed for a magazine picture with black cats and all that, wearing the number 13, because 13 super switches. So anyway, Ralph Branca, of course, the guy who gave up the home run to Bobby Thompson, a shot heard around the world in 1951, and a tiebreaker, sending the Giants to the 1951 World Series when the Yankees walloped them in 5 games. So, yeah, weird. And the weird thing about Ralph Branca is, I talked to my buddy Jim Schmiedeberg about this, is that Ralph Branca actually was a star player for Classic Concentration, the 1960s version, that had a Don Pardo as the announcer and all that. Anyway, number 12 was Monte Irvin. Monte Irvin was a pioneer for African Americans in sports. He played in the Negro Leagues. He helped the 1951 Giants get to the World Series. He was a prolific hitter, who, of course, his stats are unrealistic because he spent a lot of time in the Negro Leagues. He's like Josh Gibson in a way. Number 11 was Kimbo Slice. Kimbo Slice, great street fighter and all that, always wanted to pound people, but in televised MMA fights, he was just shit. I remember back in 2008, I think it was, on CBS, they were having a Kimbo Slice Ken Shamrock fight, or I don't know who the fighter was, but anyway, he had to pull out, and then a young guy by the name of Seth Petroselli came in and replaced him. I remember I was working a day shift at Sellers, and I was psyched to see Kimbo Slice on TV. And then Seth Petroselli beat him within 1 minute, and shocked Kimbo Slice and shocked everyone, saying that Kimbo Slice is human after all. Number 10, Lawrence Phillips. Lawrence Phillips had a great career in front of him, but his crimes against people just hurt him. Started for Nebraska, winning a couple of Orange Bowls and a couple of national titles, by the way, in the 90s. I put him on my all-Nebraska team, obviously, because he was good. Johnny Rogers is on there, too, even though Johnny Rogers got in trouble for some kind of gun offense and all that. But anyway, Lawrence Phillips was great. The Rams made him the 6th overall pick. They thought they could structure him. He couldn't do it. Dick Vermeil, who was made head coach of the Rams, actually thought he could fix Lawrence Phillips, but Lawrence Phillips got mad over playing time and left the team, and Vermeil had to cut him. He bounced around. He even played for the Montreal Alouettes in the CFL. Of course, me being an Alouettes fan, I didn't mind, but I knew he was troubled. Lawrence Phillips was in prison because he ran over some teenage boys and all during a California football game, and then he was charged with killing his roommate, his cellmate, and of course he committed suicide. Number 9 is Dennis Byrd. Now, I know he doesn't seem like a star player in football, but anyway, Dennis Byrd is there for a reason. He's a big inspiration. Of course, the Jets, number 90, which was unofficially retired after he suffered a massive injury when he collided with a teammate while trying to sack Kansas City's Steve DeBerg. I think it was Steve DeBerg, but anyway. Back in 1992, of course, he had C4 vertebrae fractured, and he was told he was going to be in a wheelchair. But he pushed himself, and at the Jets home opener in 1993, he walked onto the field, and he made everyone cry. All that. Anyway, Dennis Byrd was an inspiration because he gave his number 90, his last Jets jersey, which was cut apart from him, of course, to free him from his injury. And the Jets used it as magic to beat the Pats in the 2011 NFL playoffs. The last time the Jets made the playoffs. By the way, I hate saying that, but sorry, Roberto Gil Butterell, but that's the truth. Dennis Byrd suffered through that, and then of course he died in a car crash. Number 8, Johan Cruyff. It's the soccer fan in me. Johan Cruyff was fantastic. He transformed Holland from a never-do-well team to a fantastic team. Cruyff was part of a great dynasty for Ajax in Europe in the 1970s, which was on par with Bayern Munich for best team of the 70s. So anyway, Johan Cruyff made some fancy moves, but unfortunately, his personal prima donna behavior actually ruined Holland's chances. According to the legend, Johan Cruyff wanted a different goalie instead of a star. De Groot was a star goalie for Holland, but he wanted Youngblood to come in, and of course Youngblood was not that young. He was 34 or something like that. And of course he led Holland to the 74 World Cup finals against West Germany. West Germany won 2-1. Contrary to popular belief, he did not play for the 78 Dutch team that went to the finals in Argentina against the Argentines. He retired from professional football in the mid-70s. He tried his career in North America in the old North American Soccer League, but it just didn't work out. He was a star coach for Ajax and Barcelona, among other things. Number 7, Buddy Ryan. Good old Buddy Ryan, the defensive coach who should not have been a head coach in the first place. The key man of the 46 defense for the Chicago Bears in 1986. He left the Super Bowl champion Bears to pursue a head coach job in Philadelphia. He wasn't that bad when he had to be good. His biggest loss was in 1988 during the divisional playoffs against the Chicago Bears in Chicago in the famous Fog Bowl on New Year's Eve, ironically enough, 1988. Of course, the Eagles got screwed. Philly slowed down. Buddy Ryan was made a defensive coordinator with Houston. He looked good, but of course he got in trouble for punching offensive coordinator Kevin Kilbride on a Sunday night football game against the Jets back in 1983 for the Houston Oilers. He hated the offense because the chuck and duck thing. He didn't want his defense always bailing out the offense. So anyway, he left the Oilers to be head coach for Arizona, and that didn't work out at all. Of course, Buddy's sons Rex and Rob Ryan were part of the Buffalo Bills, and I say were part of it, but of course in the past week they got fired. Na 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 na. Hey, goodbye. Good times. Number 6, John Saunders. Now you maybe think this is biased because he's Canadian and all that. Many people forget he's Canadian, but it's mostly to do that he was there at ESPN nearly from the start. ESPN, of course, started in 1979. It was just amazing about what ESPN could do and all that. But John Saunders was big. He did college football. He did college basketball. He did hockey. He did Toronto Raptors stuff for 5 years before Chuck Swirsky kind of took over. Anyway, John Saunders was a huge guy and all that. One particular memory I have of him was when he was talking to Dick Vitale in 1989 when ESPN actually showed NCAA basketball coverage during the tournament, and the first round game was between Princeton and Georgetown, and you know, they were talking about Princeton almost upsetting Georgetown and all that. So anyway, John Saunders was a key part of college football. He was Canadian, and weird of all is his alma mater, Western Michigan, went 13-0 and are playing in the Cotton Bowl on Monday against Wisconsin. Wow. Number 5, Jose Fernandez. Jose Fernandez is a great pitcher. Was a great pitcher. He was a phenom, and I could feel it, even though, you know, I cheer for teams in the American League. He had the Marlins eating out of his hand. The Marlins were a decent team when he was pitching. He once had, what was it, between 16 and 21 straight home games without a loss. Home starts without a loss. He was great at that atrocity of a stadium. I know it was built on top of the old Orange Bowl, but that monstrosity cost like $1.5 billion. That was just horrific. I mean, you could make a decent ballpark out of it, but it was overfunded. But anyway, Jose Fernandez, of course, died in a boating accident. The creepy thing is that almost at the same time as he died, the number 2 person on my cell died. And I nearly dropped my bowl of cereal. I literally had a bowl of cereal, and I nearly dropped it when I heard Jose Fernandez had passed away. And I'm like, good grief, him? But anyway, of course, unfortunately, he's not ranked higher on my list. Well, A, because, you know, I could have dropped him from 5 down to like 8 or 9 because he was like drunk. He was intoxicated when the boating accident happened, but you know, we don't know if it was his fault or anyone else's. But anyway, the Marlins retired his number 16, and they won't unretire it for obvious reasons. Number 4, Pat Summitt. Oh yeah, I forgot about Jose Fernandez. Is that he and his family made like 3 attempts to flee from Cuba to Miami, and he nearly died once. But anyway, number 4 is Pat Summitt. Pat Summitt, one of the best women's basketball coaches, I think the best women's basketball coach of all time. Sorry, Gino Amorata of Connecticut, but Pat Summitt was the queen of college hoops. She led her Tennessee team to a lot of undefeated marks and 4 or 5 national titles. I forgot to check how many. But anyway, Pat Summitt was huge, and she made Tennessee into a superpower when her women's teams could easily beat the men's teams on any given Sunday, or Saturday, or Wednesday, or Tuesday. But anyway, Pat Summitt was huge. Number 3, Gordie Howe. Gordie Howe, well, you may think, oh, it's Canadian bias. Technically, no. If you hear about numbers 1 and 2, you'll understand why I put Gordie at number 3. Gordie Howe was a damn legend in Canada. I know I did a YouTube video about top 10 Gordie Howe moments. You should watch that. Just search top 10 Gordie Howe moments for my video. But anyway, enough of the pandering. Gordie Howe was huge. He was one of the best right wingers in league history. And this is like, his prime was in the late 50s, early 60s. And this is like 2016 now. But anyway, Gordie Howe was huge. There was always the big debate. Who was the better right winger? Him or Rocket Richard? But anyway, Gordie Howe nearly, as I said in my video, nearly had his career ended in 1950 after a nasty hit from Teeter Kennedy, which was accidental at that time. And Gordie Howe, thankfully, the doctors did an operation to relieve the brain swelling. And despite the fact that maybe he could have worn a helmet for the rest of his career, he didn't. He refused to wear a helmet. Anyway, Gordie Howe played from 46 to 72 in the NHL, and then a couple years later, he was milked into coming to the World Hockey Association because the Houston Aeros drafted Mark and Marty Howe. So anyway, Gordie Howe parlayed it into some great years. He went to New England at the end of the 1979 season, WHA season. He played for Hartford. And for his final season, he went to the All-Star game in Detroit in 1980, ironically enough. And he did well. Number 2, Arnold Palmer. Arnold Palmer had a sweet natural swing. He was fantastic, one of the best golfers in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. What people forget is that Arnold Palmer's first title, PGA title of all time, was in Canada at the Canadian Open in 1955. Swear to God, I watched the top 10 Canadian PGA moments of all time on YouTube, and that's what they said. Arnold Palmer's first win was in Canada, of all places. Arnold Palmer always had that big rivalry with Jack Nicklaus in the 60s and 70s. He had a great swing. He had a drink named after him, you know, half iced tea, half wine, or whatever you want to call it. Half wine? I can't remember what he called it. But anyway, half iced tea, half lemonade. And they were selling cans of it by the dozens at Sellers, and I managed to pick up a lot of them, and I liked it. I really did. So anyway, Arnold Palmer was always remembered as a great golfer. Always. And he always will be. And number 1 is the greatest, Muhammad Ali. And yes, just like Gordie Howe, I did a top 10 Muhammad Ali moments. So look that up on my channel. As is. Muhammad Ali was huge. You know, he was not just a boxing icon, he was a pop culture icon. Mostly people outside of the boxing world noticed him when he refused induction into the U.S. Army in 1967. Although it might be said, you know, maybe the U.S. Army had a special job for him and didn't want to send him to Vietnam. And of course, Muhammad Ali, with all the quotes like butterfly sting like bee, I'm the greatest one now. He said, I ain't no fighting, no Phoenix Khan. Mostly because he says, I'm not fighting an enemy that doesn't want to see me. But anyway, Muhammad Ali was huge. He was popular around the world. Especially Howard Cosell taking off his toupee, or attempting to. Anyway, I still have the Muhammad Ali roast on my computer, and it was great seeing all these stars of the 70s come out. See, Ruth Buzzy swatting him over the head with her purse. Billy Crystal doing a great impersonation of both Muhammad Ali and Howard Cosell. Freddie Prinze Sr. and Tony Orlando. Georgia Angle. The Jeffersons, you know, Sherman Hemsley and Isabel Sanford. Will Chamberlain. Tony Graziano. Floyd Patterson, a few other stars were there. And of course, Cosell. Oh, mighty mouth. Muhammad Ali, of course, fought a little too hard. He lost the heavyweight title thanks to the U.S. Army, and then he gained it back in '74, beating Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle. He lost it in 1978 to a young Leon Spinks, but then beat him in the rematch, but he kept fighting too long. And if you watch the 30 for 30 special about him, with him and Larry Holmes in 1980, you'll understand why. So anyway, that's all I've got for the top 20 sports deaths. Stay tuned. The next video will be the top 30 celebrity deaths. Adios 2016. May you take these sports people and make them onto fantasy teams forever.